What's up, guys? Joe, good morning. Super cheers. This first question is basically from our buddy, Stove Monkey 21, right? And his question was, I have no idea how to edit videos. Maybe make a vid about what PC specs do you need to edit videos, and then the basics of editing videos, right? Now, there are two questions here, but I'm mainly gonna focus on this video and responding to the specs that you may need for a PC, right? One, something that I struggled with before I got into editing big time is understanding what you needed to work, right? There's so much information out there in regards to PC parts, CPUs, GPUs, RAM or whatever. If you're not familiar with editing, it could be overwhelming, right? Just building a PC can be too much, right? You don't know where to start because there's so much shit out there that it can be, overwhelming and confusing and all that shit, right? So this may be a long video because I'm going to go through each part of what you may need in a PC, and I'm going to show you what I use, right? But if you want to know what my specifications are, I'll make a list right here. That way, you don't have to watch the whole video and you can see what I suggest, right? So that being said, full disclaimer, I'm not as smart as Paul or any other tech YouTuber, all right? So I just want to get that out of the way, right? I basically learned about PCs or more about PCs while working with Paul, but still he knows way more about this shit because, he's a brilliant motherfucker when it comes to like PCs, right? Much enough to edit his videos, but also over the years of working of editing, I realized there are certain things that do help me to edit faster, right? And I'm gonna make sure I share with you what I know in regards to PC building and the specs that you may need, right? That way you can have less problems in regards to editing your videos speed-wise. And I think that's the main thing that comes down to building a PC, speed. Now, first things first, one video is from Tech Notice. I'll put this in the description. This guy, he goes to show you that is it possible to edit without a GPU, right? Now the thing is, because GPUs are very expensive right now, those are kind of hard to come by. From my understanding, they're starting to become more easier to purchase because the crypto market is not doing that well. The thing I want you guys to see about this video is that he does tests with Intel and AMD. And then what he does is basically he has an Intel and AMD build, and then in between the two, he uses Premiere Pro to scroll through footage, right? So, he kind of goes over raw footage, and this is mainly using integrated graphics that the CPU has, right? Whether it's Intel or AMD, right? Now, one thing that I do not like about these types of videos is that in my case, I always work with proxies. And that's something that I want you guys to get in the habit of using when you start editing, is using proxies, right? He does tests with multiple formats, which I think it is kind of cool. Yeah, he does. Here's the timestamps. He does 4K 8-bit, 4K 10-bit, red raw. Now I want to jump to the raw section of the video, right? I want you to see something interesting.
Complex codecs. We have the red raw 4K, okay? This is full resolution. Let's have a look. How well does this work over here? Wow, okay, this is very, very smooth. Look at this. This is smooth as anything.
All right, the reason why I want to show you this specific area is that he's working with raw footage. Now, the thing that you want to keep in mind is when you want to work with a PC, right, with your footage, something that's going to help you immensely to work faster is working with a raw, lossless format. Now, something that I use and when I create my proxies is that I render all my videos in a GoPro Cineform codec. Now, the thing about this codec is that it was created by GoPro, obviously, but the thing is that when you create a proxy using this codec, the Cineform codec, the playback is very smooth, right? Just like this guy was experiencing, because it's a raw format. Basically, what's happening is that when you record something, say with your smartphone or a digital camera, it's creating a compressed format as you're filming, right? So when you're basically playing back your footage on any editing software, what's happening is that your CPU has to decode or decompress the footage that you're scrolling over, right? But in this case, because it's a raw footage, meaning that there's no compression going on, the playback is smooth, right? Because it's using the built-in GPU of the CPU, right? So there's no decoding happening from the CPU side, right? So if I play this again, he goes back to the Intel side. This is the same thing, the codec. As you can see here, how he's scrolling. It's very fast, right? Now, there may be a few like frames being lost because, you know, there's only so much a CPU can do, right? Without the help of a GPU. But I will try to show you this part that, like, you know, the scrolling that he's doing, the playback is very smooth as he's scrolling through the timeline, right? And this is using like a 4K footage from the Red camera, right? So yeah, keep that in mind, is that basically something that will help you edit faster. It's not necessarily the PC parts as well. I mean, they do help, don't get me wrong. But once you start to organize your workflow in a manner that like the streamline is like a lot faster, in the sense of like you setting up your computer to edit with proxies. In this case, like I said, use a Cineform proxy. The playback will be a lot faster and smoother. That way you don't have to worry about like any stutter rate, any frames being dropped or anything like that, right? This is one of my videos when I went to Colorado, right? Now if we go to the raw footage here, as you can see, like the playback is very smooth, right? It's very fast. There's no stuttering going on in whatsoever, right? Now the reason why this is happening is because, again, I use a codec, Cineform, right? Yeah, I have a proxy file that I create my proxy files at, and all these are the proxy files that I use to create that format, the Cineform, right? So basically what has happened is, instead of using like the raw original file, it's editing using the proxy Cineform, right? The reason why I'm lingering so much on this is because once you have a workflow in developing proxies for your editing, it's gonna make your life a lot easier, right? Because if you don't have like the strongest CPU, the strongest GPU and all that shit, and if you wanna edit working off your computer's processing power, it's gonna slow you down. But get into the habit of using proxies to edit. It's gonna make your life a lot easier and it's gonna be a lot faster, right? Now, obviously, I'm screen capturing, so you know there's some encoding going on and all this stuff, right? But I'm using the proxy, right? So as you can see here, look how smooth that is, right? Really quick. Now, if I'm gonna deselect the proxy use, now it's just using the raw format off the camera. Look what happens over here, where it says video decode. All right, see that? Now my GPU is working extra because it has to decode my footage, right? Because it's not using that proxy, right? Now, if I enable proxies again, it's using that Cineform proxy that I'm creating. Now look what happens over here. See the playback, how smooth it is? But look, the video decode is not happening, right? Because it has nothing to decode because this is a raw format. You'll see that? So this is basically what you want. Okay, so yeah, you can see here basically when using the proxy, I'm able to play back very smoothly and there's no decoding going on over here. But the moment I deselect again the proxy use and it's reading off like the raw format from my camera, you can see here the video decode starts to increase, right? So more processing power is needed to play back this video, right? Now I'm able to play back off the raw because I have a good GPU. I have a 2080 Ti. But the point I'm trying to make with this, I'm trying to get at is if you want to build a PC and you're in a position that you're not able to buy a GPU, it is possible to edit without a GPU at the moment, right? Just to get you started, right? So I want to start with that, is that it is possible for you to edit without using a GPU. So you want to make sure that you get a CPU that's strong enough, right? That has enough processing power to create proxies to start with, so you're not, waiting that much, right? You create your proxies, and then, like I said, the playback will be smooth because you're playing off a raw, right? Just like this guy is explaining through his video, right? All right, now I spent a lot of time with like the whole Cineform thing because there's something, I guess, that once you learn to use, like using proxies to edit, you won't need as of a strong computer once you get your proxies going, right? Because the playback will be a lot smoother and you'll be able to edit faster, right? Now, where specs comes into play is when you start to do more advanced shit. Say if you want to like do certain things that involves like 3D, rendering and all that other shit, you're gonna need not necessarily a stronger PC, but you're gonna need a PC that is able to like handle more information, right? And I'll get into what I mean with that in a bit. Now, taking everything I just showed you, to start with, I would suggest you definitely need to build a PC, right? I'll suggest a PC over a Mac. Now, Macs are cool, don't get me wrong. I think they're very user-friendly. If you don't know what you're doing, you can get a Mac as ready to go. It's a box or whatever, right? It's very user-friendly. However, the thing is that once you start editing, if you start wanting to get plugins, you want to get extensions for your software and all that shit, a lot of software is designed for PC. the PC OS, right? A lot of stuff does not work with Mac. Even though Premiere Pro is the same software, if you're using Premiere Pro or DaVinci inside of like a Mac, most likely you can have less options to get like plugins and extensions to be able to work with your software because you're using a Mac, right? So I would suggest that you use a PC, right? Build your own PC. That being said, I suggest you go with an AMD build, right? The reason why I suggest an AMD build is because AMD CPUs, depending on what gen you're using, you're able to upgrade your PC to a better CPU, right? So for example, now currently we're on what, Gen 4, I believe, on AMD CPUs, right? They're like the 5000 series. So let's say if you want to like get like a CPU that's like a 6-core, right? And you get the 5600X, this would cost $300. You're able to get that right now, right? Now, the thing about these CPUs is that they have a different socket that they use, which is called the AM4 socket, right? So other PCs, they share the same socket, right? So the cool thing about that is that if you want to upgrade, say from like a 6-core up to an 8-core or 12-core, you are able to like just simply buy the CPU, you remove the CPU and you can drop it in here, and there you go, you already upgraded your computer, right? The thing with Intel is that you cannot do that, from my understanding for the most part, right? If you want to upgrade your Intel CPU, you have to get a new motherboard, right? And I personally don't think that's a good way to do things. Intel CPUs are stronger in that sense, I'll admit, right? They always have a better performance, by 5 or 10%, or very little depending, right? But for the most part, price to performance, I think you're better off going with AMD CPUs, right? And like I said, the upgradability is there with AMD CPUs, right? Now, that being said, with AMD, something to keep in mind is that a new generation of CPUs is coming for AMD, the AM5, right? And in this case, as you can see, they went from using this socket, which is the AM4 at the moment. This is actually paused video, right? But the current CPUs that AMD is using has PGA, right? Has the pins in the back of the CPU, right? It looks like this, right? Now, they're going for more of this format, which the pins are now on the motherboard itself. So now like the CPU is gonna look more like this, right? The pins is flat. There's no pins on the back of the CPU, right? So that's gonna be the new format that AMD is gonna use for their future, their next generation of CPUs, right? And that brings me to my next topic about building a PC. You don't need to get the most expensive shit possible, but what I suggest is basically get what's current gen, right? Like I just showed you, right now AMD, they're using an AM4 socket on their motherboards, right? But it's coming up that they have a new generations of CPU coming up, and it's gonna be the AM5 socket that I just showed you, right? It's a different way of them building the CPUs, right? Now the reason why I suggest you to go with current gen is obviously because software goes along with hardware, right? They want to keep up with each other, right? So every time there's like a new driver or software or product that gets launched from the CPU side, the software wants to keep up with that technology, right? So the drivers and all the other shit gets created, right? So you want to make sure you kind of like stay current, right? PCs have a long lifespan. When Paul helped me build my PC, that was about 3 years ago, I believe. I'm still using my computer at the moment. It's still doing well, right? You can get very good results getting like a base level entry PC, but as long as it's current gen, because technology has been increasing so much, PCs are really, really fucking good. Just think of the first PC you had when you were a kid, right? Compared to the shit you have now, massive difference, right? So yeah, whatever you can get currently, just make sure it's a good base level entry that you're able to afford, but make sure it's current gen, in my opinion, right? All right, and my next suggestion when it comes to building a PC, you definitely want to go with an NVIDIA GPU, right? Now, there's a lot of like crazy high-tech GPUs that they have, right? Simply put, you can actually get like the gaming version designed for like the general market. Just make sure you get a GeForce RTX, right? They have like other cards like a Quadro and I don't know what else, right? You don't really need that, right? Just get yourself something that has a GeForce RTX, right? And again, that's current gen, right? Actually, I believe like the 360 GPU is actually a good entry PC GPU, and I'll tell you why. The cool thing about like the GeForce RTX current graphics card is it has like a lot of built-in technology for streaming or encoding, right? Now, right now I'm using like OBS to screen capture my video, right? Okay, this is the settings from my OBS, right? And if we go to recording, I'm using the NVIDIA NVNC H.264 codec, right? This codec is basically what being used to encode my screen capture at the moment, right? That's what I'm using. Yeah, these current GPUs, you have your GPU built into it so you can like play your video game and all that shit, but there's actually additional technology built into it so you can live stream or do some video coding. That's totally separate, right? Which is really fucking cool. When I do my live streams, that's basically what's happening. My GPU is doing the encoding for me to send the information to my stream, right? To YouTube or Twitch or whatever you want to use, right? Instead of like doing like the processing itself through the CPU, it saves all that like processing power and it gets done in with my GPU, right? So definitely that's why I suggest you to get like an NVIDIA GeForce RTX, right? Another cool thing about like screen capturing through OBS is that the video encoder that it uses to screen capture your gameplay or whatever, because it's NVIDIA codec, you actually do not need to create proxies, right? The playback is actually pretty good, right? See, I got some gameplay here, me playing Left Back 4 Blood, and like the playback is actually pretty smooth, I mean, yeah, there is a little choppy, but I mean, like you can see here, I'm just able to like, scroll really fast, right? Because like it's the codec that was created by NVIDIA is able to read its own codec pretty fast, right? So that's another benefit of using like in an NVIDIA GPU, the screen capture codec. The playback's a lot easier and you can skip the whole proxy thing that I was explaining, right? So something to keep in mind. Now, when it comes to like a GPU, the reason why I think the 360 is a good starting point is because if we compare the specs, right, of the 3000 series cards, the 360 here, as you can see here, it has 12 gigabytes of GDDR memory. Then it starts to go up to the 360 Ti and then goes to 8 gigabytes until you get to the 380. Then it gets to the 12, right? For being like, I guess, like a lower version card, I would suggest go with like the higher gigabyte memory, right? Yeah, you might have less CUDA cores and all this stuff, right? This does help, I'm not gonna lie, but the fact that an entry-level GPU has this high amount of memory, of GDDR memory, I think this is very beneficial, right? Usually the memory usage, my 2080 Ti, as you can see, I have 11 gigabytes of memory, right? And so far, I'm using about almost like 3 gigabytes of my GPU memory, right? Now, the time like this increase in usage is when I'm rendering primarily, right? So let me just show you. I'm gonna export this. I'm gonna use my media encoder. So I'm using my Adobe Media Encoder here to render. So if I hit play, it's rendering, and you can see the GPU usage popped up a bit more, right? It's not that much, right? But the thing is that I'll pause that. Now this was it was like almost 3, then went to 3.4, right? Now if I have multiple projects, actually, that's where more GPU memory starts to get used, right? Because it starts to create a lot of multiple projects, right? Another reason why you want to have more GPU memory is if you guys want to get more into 3D rendering, if you want to experiment with Blender and stuff like that, actually that's where more of the GPU memory starts to get used up, right? Because what happens is like if you want to use any type of 3D work, a lot of like textures and information gets stored in the GPU memory, right? So the more memory you have, the more you'll be able to like work without any interruptions, right? So in this case, for editing and work reasons, I would suggest the 360, right? And go with like the 12 gigabytes of memory space, right? There's an article here from Digital Trends that they talk about the performance of the 3060 that I was just talking about. I mean, game-wise, it's fine. I mean, obviously, why? But we're talking about editing here. It says right here, for 3D modeling, ran the first 3 tests in a Blender benchmark. Here, the RTX 360 beats the RTX 2070 Super without breaking a sweat. It even trades lower with the RTX 2080 Ti. This is what I have, the 2080 Ti. Beating it in the class mode render by 2 seconds, right? So this card, the 360, is keeping up with the 2080 Ti, which is I have, right? So it's doing very well, right? But see, it goes to show you how powerful the Ampere architecture really is, right? So basically, the technology that is used inside of the GPU, right, is updated, is different, right? From my 2080 Ti, that technology that's built inside of the 360 is totally different than 2080 Ti, right? So that's why I suggest going with the current gen hardware, right? Because obviously, even though my 2080 Ti is pretty good, as explained here, the 3060, it kind of like matches the 2080 Ti, which is what I got, right? Which is pretty good. And this card is basically, well, if you can find it, but it's like 329, right? That's pretty good. And you're getting something editing-wise that matches the performance of a 2080 Ti, right? So yeah, keep that in mind. That's my opinion when it comes to graphics cards. Definitely go with an NVIDIA take advantage of like the built-in technology that it has, so you can like encode. We do screen capturing, like I am, or if you want to, when you want to start doing some streaming to your computer, the built-in technology that this thing has, the same technology that's built into my graphics cards to encode my screen capture here, is being used to encode my gameplay when I'm playing, God of War or whatever through YouTube, right? So getting current gen RTX GeForce GPUs is a must, is a benefit for you, right? If you want to go down that route, which I'm sure you are. Now with CPUs, like I said, the new AM5 socket is coming for AMD, right? So I would encourage you to wait for that to come out, right? Because that's going to be the next current gen of CPUs that's coming out. When that happens, most likely they usually launch like 3 CPUs at the same time. From my experience, when it comes to CPU launches, they don't just come out with one. They usually come out with a couple, right? Or they come up with maybe one, but then they have a few lined up, pretty soon after that, right? Definitely, you want to go with a 6-core, 12-thread CPU, right? You could go with a 4-core, 8-thread CPU. The way how I see it, render time is going to be a big deal. The more cores you have, like the faster you're going to be able to render something, and it's just how it is, right? There has been cases that I've seen where like people, they just get like they say like a 4-core CPU, but because it's like has like a higher it has a faster hertz rate, boost clock, or they can overclock it or whatever. So maybe it can perform better than a 6-core CPU. That does happen, but I think it's just best for you to get like a 6-core CPU to start with, right? That's just me, right? Especially once you start to like do a lot of multitasking, in the sense like there's times where like I'm rendering stuff and at the same time I'm still editing. So you want to have like your computer's gonna be doing a lot of shit at the same time, right? So you want to make sure your CPU is able to like maintain all that like multitasking and shit like that along with your GPU, right? So going with a 6-core, 12-thread CPU, I suggest it. All right. I told you this is going to be a long video. Thanks for sticking by if you have been. All right, so the next thing I'll talk about is RAM. Now with my computer, I got 128 gigabytes of RAM built in, right? This could be overkill. There has been times where I've seen like this thing spike up to like 90 gigabytes of RAM use, right? Depending on what I'm doing. For the most part, like the only time this thing gets used up a lot is when I'm doing like any work inside of After Effects, right? The thing that happens is that RAM for editing software, or particularly if you're gonna do VFX work or anything that has to do with any visuals, usually what happens is that your software will store a lot of information inside of your RAM. That way, like the playback can be a lot faster, right? After Effects, which is something that I use, that thing stores a lot of RAM, a lot of information, right? So let's say at this moment, it's using, let's just say 20 gigabytes of RAM at the moment, right? Now, if I start After Effects, okay, see, I just turned on After Effects and it went from like 20 gigabytes and it went up by 2 gigabytes, right? Yeah, because After Effects uses a lot of RAM, right? Sometimes if I do like visuals, right? All right, so I just added like this like animation. As you can see here, I just added like a background and it just jumped up like almost to like 25 gigabytes in use, right? And it's still going up. No, it's still working here. I'm trying to show you basically the importance of RAM. See, it's already at 26 now. And this is just me dropping in a background in After Effects, right? It's 27. See that? See this green here? That's basically creating preview files and this being stored inside of the RAM. And as you can see here, it's already going up to 30, right? Just to play this animation, right? See how it keeps going up? Yeah, it keeps going and going and going. Yeah, still playing. See that? Yep, 36, 37, 38. Now, as you can see how it keeps going up, right? This is basically the reason why I kind of like upgraded my RAM all the way to 128, right? I want to make sure I had enough RAM space for my animations, right? Because in this case, what you're seeing here, almost like a flip book, right? You need a lot of pages to show the animation when you flip the animation, right? So in this case, each page or flip is it's a frame, right? So each one of these guys is being stored inside of the RAM for playback, right? So basically what's happening here is like this green bar, it basically is indicating that it already created like a preview file, right? That's being stored inside of like the RAM. This here is taken as well because it's creating each additional new frame, right? And that's what's happening. So each new frame that gets created is getting stored inside of like the RAM here. Yeah, it's only 4 seconds, right? At 29 frames per second or 30 frames per second. And basically, all this is using almost 62 gigabytes of more, right? So by the time this is done, it could be up to like 70 gigabytes of RAM being used, right? So this is why, now I'm gonna stop this But yeah, so now like it gets to a point where like if I hit play, see the playback is very smooth, right? No big deal, because this animation is being played back from the RAM. So that's why RAM is very important when you want to do animation or anything that has to do with certain like visuals, right? In After Effects. And the same can happen with your GPU, the memory that's built inside of your GPU, right? Primarily if you want to do more 3D work, right? 3D related stuff, right? Blender, Maya, OBS, Cinema 4D, shit like that. Those 3D softwares, they use the memory built into inside of your GPU to store textures and 3D data and stuff like that. That's why having a higher GPU memory is more important. In my opinion, if you want to go, when you want to choose a GPU, right? In this case, I use After Effects, not all the time anymore, but when I do, having this additional memory is very helpful, right? Not only that, in the memory, there's a lot of shit that's going on in the background, right? See, it's almost 1 gigabyte being used for the media encoder. Adobe Premiere is using like almost 3 gigabytes. All this like background stuff is being used, right? Like there's a lot that's going on inside of my GPU, my computer, right? In the background that's eating on my memory, right? So yeah, RAM is one of those things where depending on what you want to do, you can cater to how much RAM you want to install into your computer, right? Now in my case, because of what I do, as you can see here, this is only like a short animation. It's already used up like 60 gigabytes of RAM, right? So I still have plenty of space from my 128 gigabytes of RAM that I have built into my computer, right? And what I suggest is basically, for starters, it's okay to start with 16 gigabytes of RAM, right? But if you're able to, I would suggest you start with 32 gigabytes of RAM just to get yourself going, right? Because RAM can get expensive, right? And that can go to my next step. Is basically when it comes to motherboards, you definitely want to get a motherboard that has a lot of like expandability, right? You definitely want, like I said, you can get like 2 sticks of RAM. Each stick is 16 gigabytes of RAM. So that's going to equal 32 gigabytes of RAM, right? And you can use 2 slots right here, right? And that'd be good to start out with. And then like down the line when you're able to, you get another 2 kit RAM, 16 gigabytes of RAM each. And that's another 32. So you have a total of 64 gigabytes of RAM. And I think with that, you'd be pretty set. As you can see here, I'm like using 64 or 62 gigabytes of RAM, right? But as you can see, I have a lot of shit going on right now. So it's going to be up to you. Start with 16 if you want. If you're able to, go with 32 gigabytes of RAM to start out with. I suggest that as a starting point, right? Start with 32 gigabytes of RAM on your PC, right? And definitely get a PC that you're able to expand. So get something that has like 4 slots for RAM. That way, like down the line when you're able to, you can buy an additional kit and you can install them. Obviously, they got to match. And then like, you'll be good, right? Especially now with this new AM4 or AM5 socket that's being created. With this guy, you are able to use DDR5. I'm using DDR4. So this is going to be faster, right? So that's what I'm saying. Wait till like this comes out. So you'll be more current gen wise. And this thing will be, it'll be a lot faster, most likely than what I got, right? But yeah, definitely start with 16 if you can, and then upgrade from that. But if you're able to and you can afford it, go with 32 gigabytes to start with, and then upgrade from that. But once you get to a certain point where you want to expand more, then you can get one of these motherboards that has like the 8 slots, right? You can expand to a high amount of RAM like I did, right? Which is 128, right? Now it gets expensive. Like for me, it came out to almost a total of $700 in just RAM when I got the full kit. So it gets up there, right? Yeah, $700 in just RAM, right? But it's a kit that I have at the moment. I'm gonna keep, but mine is not current gen. It's DDR4, right? So now, like, if I want to upgrade to the new platform, then I need to get a whole new set of fucking RAM, and I don't know how much that shit's gonna cost, right? And I don't even want to know right now. But I'm just letting you know that, yeah, this is how you kind of like, you want to make sure you give yourself room to expand, right? So that's why I suggest getting yourself a motherboard. For starters, definitely get yourself a motherboard that has 4 slots to go. All right. Sorry if it's a long video, but there's a specific question. And I think it's something that I want to make sure that I get enough information out. Now, since we're on the topic of motherboards, now I mentioned about you not editing with a GPU, right? Now, you got to make sure you get the right CPU to play graphics out of, which is in this case, integrated graphics, right? Motherboards, see, like such as this one, it has a built-in HDMI and a display port. the cool thing about this is that basically now you're able to like get a GPU that is designed that has integrated graphics. You gotta make sure that you get a CPU that has integrated graphics. You're able to connect to the motherboard, and then you're able to receive visual information, right? From my understanding, it is possible to have dual monitors off your CPU, right? The graphics that's built into your CPU, right? So keep that in mind if you want to build a PC without a graphics card at the moment, right? That's only if you don't have a graphics card, right? Another thing that is very good to have built into a motherboard is a Type-C connection, right? The thing with these Type-C connections is that basically the transfer speed rates is faster than USB, right? Having Type-C, it is a benefit, right? Especially if you're gonna be working with someone, you need the transfer footage and all that shit. Having a Type-C connection is very beneficial. Something that also you want to keep in mind is basically, let me zoom in here. This one, yeah, it has this Type-C, right? But this one has a clear CMOS and a BIOS update, right? The reason that that's important is that for some reason, if you need to upgrade your BIOS, you're able to just like add the driver to a USB. You connect it to a specific USB on your motherboard and you push a button, and pretty much that's gonna like start reading like the BIOS off of a USB, and it's gonna install the new updated BIOS into your motherboard, right? Without you using the CPU or anything like that. As long as it has power, it's gonna work, right? So yeah, having a motherboard that has a Type-C and also has like a BIOS upgrade motherboard itself built in, I strongly suggest it, right? That way you're able to upgrade the BIOS for whatever reason, and without you worrying about, connecting a CPU to it, is able to do it with the built-in chipset that like the motherboard has, right? So that's something to keep in mind as well. All right, fuck. Yeah, this video is going long, but yeah, sorry. You guys asked a question, I'm gonna make sure I answer you guys, right? Now, this is something that is gonna be also helpful, right? Speaking of motherboards, yeah, you wanna make sure that your motherboard has like SATA connections, right? These guys right here is where you connect your SSD storage devices to, right? This guy has 6, right? So you're able to connect 6 SSDs to these guys directly, right? Most motherboards now have an M.2 connection, which is right here. Most modern motherboards have them anyways, right? But in my case, the C drive, that's where I have my OS installed in, is an M.2 SSD into the motherboard, right? That's a lot faster. I'll suggest it, right? But the other reason why you want to have, but the main reason why you want to have a motherboard that has a lot of like connections for SATA for SSDs is basically, in my case, I think it's best to have multiple SSD devices for different tasks of your computer, right? But I don't think it's best to have one SSD or one M.2, and then you have that to store your cache, you have that to store your raw, you have that to render. There's a lot of read and write shit going on that, like, if you have it all in one like local storage device, it's gonna fucking add up quick, right? Now, in my case, for the most part, I mainly use this for like software, and as you can see here, this is like a 500 gigabyte like M.2, and I only have like 100 gigabytes left of free space, right? That's because I use a lot of software. I'm downloading software, I'm experimenting and all this shit, right? I do store some files in there, but not as much, right? But as you can see, it's gonna eat up a lot of space, right? So I have a separate, SSD for my games. I got another SSD for my project files, one for my personal stuff. I have one SSD for my cache files. It's a lot easier for me to just, double click on it, and then I could just select these guys and I can delete them. It's a lot easier, right? Instead of having stored somewhere in your local C drive. I got another SSD for my proxies. So, that's basically how you want to try to like work. You want to get to that point where like each SSD has its own function, right? It's a lot easier to keep things stored in that manner, right? Because if you have everything stored in one SSD, it can get cluttered, it can become a mess. In this case here, project files, this is all strictly project files, right? I got my project files, and I got Paul's project files, and I got as well as like assets that I use when I'm editing, right? Say like lower thirds, music, and all that shit. I have it installed here, all mixed together with my project files, right? So yeah, you kind of want to get into like the habit of like doing that. Make sure you have different SSDs for different tasks for your workflow, right? Also, I have one mechanical hard drive, right, which I use for like mass storage, right? So get a motherboard where you can connect a lot of SSD storage, and that'll help you out big time, right? So you can stay more organized. And this is gonna be, I guess, my final suggestion when it comes to building a PC. The cool thing about having a very high quality power supply is that they consume actually less power, right? Now this power supply is like $100, right? But the thing is, you're getting like an 80 watt plus gold 70 50 watt power supply. This one is modular, so you're able to like connect what you need, right? And something that I learned with Paul is that something that you're gonna keep for a long time is gonna be a power supply. This may be an overkill power supply, to start with. Now, if you really are in a budget and you cannot get yourself a $100 power supply, obviously get what you need, right? But that's no problem. What I'm trying to suggest is basically you having a PC that has an upgrade path, right? Because most likely if you buy a PC, a current gen PC, there's a good chance you're going to keep that PC for a good 5 to 10 years, depending, right? If you're one of those people that likes to build a new PC all the damn time, that doesn't matter, right? But if you're starting out and all that stuff and you want to get your work, get some income, you most likely you can have your PC for a good while. So basically what I'm trying to suggest to you is basically have a PC that has the potential to upgrade more down the line when you're able to, right? So that's what I'm trying to do with this video, right? Now, finally, the thing I want to talk about is obviously you need a case to put this computer together, right? A lot of shit is cosmetic, and a lot of shit I can respect big time, right? Depending on your level of interest in PCs, right? But in my case, I'm definitely more of a function than form kind of guy. I really don't give a fuck about RGB. I could do without the tempered glass, to be honest. I mean, it looks cool, but whatever your budget is, whatever your interest is, I mean, you get what you can, right? The one thing I would suggest is basically you want to get yourself a fucking like a PC where at least it comes with fans in the front and you get one fan in the back, right? If not, you can install it later, right? You want to make sure that like the front of the case here is mainly mesh, right? That's how my computer is at the moment. The front is just mesh sucking in there, and I got a fan here in the back getting the hot air out, right? Same thing with like the top, if you want to add some more fans to get some hot air out, then yeah, go for it, right? Then there's other shit that goes along with like your PC. You want to make sure you have enough for your SATA storage and storage devices, the ease of build and all that shit. But there's plenty of videos on YouTube that you can pick for you to make a choice of what kind of PC case you would like, right? So anyways, fuck, this video is going long. All right. All right, well, this was a long video, but I just basically wanted to like, say what I had to say, because I mean, like, I feel like this is something that like, if you're starting out, you may not know exactly where to go, where to start, or, when it comes to building a PC for yourself as a worker, right? Now, as a gamer, you can just simply type $500 gaming PC and you can go there, right? But like I just showed you through this video, that the GPU, the memory that's built into the GPU, the amount of RAM that you use in your computer, the CUDA cores, the amount of like cores into your CPU and all that shit, all that does play a major factor in your workflow, right? And I just showed you that basically probably one of the main things when it comes to building a PC is basically space, right? I feel space is very important when it comes to being a worker or an editor for video content stuff, right? You definitely need to have enough RAM. You definitely need to have enough SATA storage for your project files, maybe assets, your C drive, backup stuff. You want to have different multiple storage devices connected to your motherboard. That way you stay more organized. You want to make sure you have a GPU that has enough built-in memory, especially if you want to do more 3D stuff, 3D related work. Memory built into your GPU is very important for that. Also, like, having like the upgrade ability. That's why I suggested an AMD CPU, because you can just take the CPU out and put in another one. It's a lot easier than with Intel, where you have to like completely buy a new motherboard. And also, go with the NVIDIA graphics cards, because it has like built-in technology, so you can do like the NVIDIA encoding, or you can, live stream at the same time while you play video games using the same GPU, right? That's all I know. I'm sure I can go off with more information, but yeah, this video is long enough. So anyways, thanks for your questions, Stove Monkey. I hope this helps. And anybody else that watches this video, I know it's a long one, but I try to make sure I share as much as I know and why I chose the parts that I did, right? So yeah, that was a long one. If this video has helped you out in any manner, I'll put some QR codes here if you want to help me buy a coffee. I'll really appreciate it. This fucking video was a long one, holy fuck. So anyways, that's all I have to say. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really appreciate it. And I'll talk to you later. Take care and peace.